Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. In adventure racing lingo, a dark zone is a time when, due to darkness or safety, teams are paused down the course before continuing with the race. During that time, stories are exchanged, friendships are kindled, spirits are restored, and teams have a chance to prepare for the next challenge. We hope that you make good use of this dark zone. We're glad that you're here. As listeners will remember from episode number 22, recorded just 3 days ago on February 22nd, 2022, Darren Steinbach of Team Ben Racing, who's providing media support for the team, called in live from AR Panama to give a mid-race update. That flash podcast was quite popular with our listeners, so I reached out to Darren again, and today's episode, number 23, has both Darren and Ben Racing's Jason Magness. At the time of this recording, the team just finished the race a few hours earlier, but Jason is able to pull it all together and give us a great overview of the race and Ben's experience. This race was a wild time for everyone, and thank you to Darren and Jason for joining the Dark Zone. Enjoy this episode.
It's great to be here because it means that I'm not racing anymore.
It's always nice when the race stops.
Yeah.
We had lots of race stops this time, so this is the final one now.
Yeah, this is the final race stop, yeah.
So Jason, to give our listeners a sense of what's going on right now, how long ago did you finish AR Panama?
We finished this morning. Darren would probably know better, but I think around 10 a.m.
Yeah, it was 10 a.m.
Okay. And yeah, so, we've had enough time to take a shower and, take the first of many, many naps. The first one just kind of like sets it so that you can communicate with human speech again.
Exactly. Are you doing a fine job right now doing that, Jason? So keep it up. Right. Good job. If you fall asleep mid-podcast, that's okay. No shame. We have Darren right next to you to fill in.
Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, and after a busy day of running around here, I've had a chance to scan the results. I believe that you are the first North American team to cross the finish line. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that there were a bunch of different, calculations to do, just because a lot of both the kayaking stages were affected by the storms and the wind, so there were time credits kind of all over the place. But yeah, it looks like we were the top North American team.
Gotcha. And there were so the race itself, and I always recognize that when an adventure race ends at this magnitude, all of the memories are one big jumble, right? It feels like the race started 5 minutes ago and 5 days ago and 5 years ago. You're trying to piece it all together. It sounds like from the at-home viewing experience that this was a typical expedition race where, the plan begins, the race starts, and everything kind of goes haywire from the beginning. From the start of the race was in a different spot due to winds, the paddle, the heat was there. Walk us a bit through your experience so far.
I've been lucky enough to race kind of all over the world, and there's a special flavor. Now I'm lumping Central America into what I normally would have said South American races. And I've done, all kinds of races, but South American or Central American races have a special flavor to them, we'll just say. And one of the things that we've seen a lot is it's a different culture, which is why we race, to experience these things. And everything's just a little looser and the logistics are more difficult. Maybe it is that the weather is more challenging. But having done 6 of the Patagonia expedition races, having done, the fabled Pantanal Brazil race where everything kind of fell apart in a huge way. We got here and we were just kind of rolling with it. And when they said, "Oh yeah, you're starting off the map 8 kilometers away," leaving in the bus in the morning, everybody's kind of the lightest race packs they think they can get up and over the volcano with. And then they're like, "Oh yeah, by the way, if you don't recognize anything, it's because you're not on the map yet. And we have to leave you here because the winds are too strong at the start." And I think what that means is there were really strong winds. There've been strong winds all week, but it was logistically difficult for the race start, mainly because they wanted to have really cool flags and a big archway and all that kind of stuff. And they just couldn't do it. So they ended up, building a archway and flagging and a really cool thing in the bottom of this volcanic glacier river valley.
It looked like a bit of a gully with large boulder-sized rocks that you had to jump on at the very start of the race.
It was literally in a river, and the first thing we had to do is cross through the arch and then cross this raging river. And nobody. It was classic, right? It reminded me of the scenes from the Expedition Alaska, where like people choose poorly and they're slipping on the boulders and getting washed downstream, and but they said go, and so you've got all these adventure racers saying the only instructions we have are run 8 kilometers up this river valley, and then we'll be at the start that's on our map.
Yeah, I haven't known many races that haven't started on the map, so that's a new one. The idea that you have to trek to the start of the race on the map is good. And I believe you went up and over the highest point in Panama?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely started with a bang. It was a huge amount of elevation gain right off the bat. And then I think harder on me in a lot of the races was the elevation loss. So we basically, had this river valley thing, which are just big boulders and crossing the water, probably 100 times to kind of find the best line. And then up and over the volcano, which was something like 2,600 meters. So 8,000 feet of elevation gain, and then 9,000 feet of loss. Just all on your feet.
That just trashes your legs in the beginning of the race. Like all of a sudden you're walking down for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah. The descent was 20 kilometers and lost, that 8,000 feet. So it was just crazy steep. We were losing 800 feet a kilometer for the whole way down.
Wow. Wow.
And everybody's trying to run it, and so, I saw a lot of trashed feet. When I saw the photos, Darren did a heck of a job, and kudos to you, Darren, for your work with Team Bend and carrying everything forward. And a lot of the folks at home had a really, really strong understanding of the race because of your hard work. So thank you for doing that. Some of the images, Darren, that you put up of people's feet and of their bodies, which was really otherworldly. Did you see that in a lot of the transition areas? The people were just beat up? Yeah, I mean, I think, the two things that made this race unique is, as a race director, I would have looked at that first stage and known that it was going to be really brutal on the feet. Maceration, which is when you've got the heat and that much pounding. But then with the new start, it just basically made it worse because, the recipe for maceration, which is when your, feet kind of turn into that hamburger, is like get your feet wet, make sure it's really hot, and then run them over, rocky, uneven ground, and then as soon as they're about dry, get them wet again and do it over and over and over again. And that's what the start was. It was awesome because we were just doing it and we're like, we were just hoping to get to the end of that stage with feet mostly intact.
What was your total time of the race? What was how many days did you go for?
Oh my God, that's too much to ask.
That's funny. Like that happens at the end of it. It's all one big time frame for you, right, Jason? So, Darren, do you have any calculations?
I think it was almost exactly 4 days, right? Because we started at 10 on Sunday and we ended at 10 on, let's say, Wednesday.
Yeah. So it was exactly 4 days.
4 days. Okay. So 24, 48, 96 hours. Over those 96 hours, Jason, what's your estimation for sleep?
I mean, kind of talking to the race, because there were these two, like the kayak stops or the weather holds or whatever you want to call them, the changes, we got sleep.
Gotcha.
Which was kind of interesting because basically the race felt like it had 3 mass starts, with some time credits, and it was fun. And it was also really brutal because, when they put you on a hold and said, like when they sorted everything out and they had to cancel the second kayak because of the wind, all of a sudden now they're transporting you. So I say in quotation mark, you sleep on a tiny bus jam-packed with sweaty, tired adventure racers while they bus you around and get ready to say go again. So you feel like you've slept, but that comes after 45 hours of, beating up your body and not sleeping. So
that's really challenging because it isn't like, sitting in a jostling Panamanian bus isn't exactly restful. So, you had to get still, you had to get all your muscles had to get tired. You had to get in kind of a prone position, and you had to restart over again.
Yeah. And the buses.
Yeah, they're Panamanian buses, which means they're actually party buses that play loud music, have lights underneath them. But one of them had a side pipe exhaust and they all had snorkels on them. And they were really intense.
and little, and like every single seat is full, and they don't have any storage for your bags. So like bags are on everybody's lap and you're just there. And it's back to the South American kind of racing, even Central American. It's like nobody really knew what was going on. like that you're kind of along for the ride. Like you get in a bus. I thought it was going to be an hour ride. 6 hours later, we're lost. Like literally the bus is lost. He's stopping in the middle of the jungle at all these tiny roads. Like the bus sounds like it's about to break down. And we're just like, what is going on? And then eventually like you show up and they're like, okay, you're going to start again in 37 minutes. And you're just like, wow, okay.
And that second or the third start, I guess, the second restart was in a very remote spot. And we had to cross a bridge that was about a bus width. I think it was maybe an old railroad bridge that they'd put some metal plates on. I was scared crossing it in a Kia. And everyone had I would estimate maybe a quarter of the racers had wrecked severely on the first bike leg.
Yeah. Well, Florida. It was Central Florida got knocked out. Yeah,
they got knocked out. And so everyone had battle wounds. And Jason has a really good one. One of his butt cheeks looks like Starry Night by Picasso. Oh. And so actually sitting in a bus is worse than like sitting on a bike seat.
Well, I always like to bring class and culture to the podcast. So knowing that your buttocks now look like a famous painting, right. We're really turning the volume up here.
And we're already licensing it as an NFT. So, we gotta figure out how to make these move forward. But yeah, Chelsea and I are lucky because we've kind of had this experience of the restarts and especially the windy paddles in the Patagonia Expedition race. And we love, we feel really fortunate that we were far enough ahead in the field, that we are strong paddlers, that we did get to go out on that first paddle. And it was amazing. It was really rowdy. We didn't bring sails, which, sails were allowed. And to us, they just kind of were more hassle. But it was like a perfect downwind, like epic conditions for sailing, but really, really rough. And then really hard to control your boat. So some of the top teams were, I think one of the reasons they started the rescues because they were just being blown out to this ocean, right? And they're just like,
and you were on the plastic sit-atop kayaks, right? You were on the big bathtub kayaks.
Yes, and that's someday we should sit down and do a podcast on all the things that are wrong with adventure racing and how easy they would be to fix, and open the Pandora's box of like sit on top kayaking is not a sport. Right. And so it can be eliminated from this, world's toughest sport thing. But yeah, we're in sit-on-top kayaks in, seas that if like the Navy had come out and seen a sit-on-top kayak out there, they'd have been like, number one, you guys are idiots. And now we're going to rescue you.
Yeah. You're coming off the water. How cold was the water?
The water was great. I mean, It was, it wasn't that cold. Yeah. It just that, literally it was, we're crossing these big channels along the coast of Panama and the wind is just like blowing us where we don't want to go.
I think the tide was going up too at that point, wasn't it?
Yeah. For us, we're fighting the tide. It was pretty interesting to be out there.
So after that trek though, that was when you came into that big mountain bike, right? It was trek to a mountain bike.
Yeah.
And that was the mountain bike that really hurt a lot of those teams. Because did you keep going downhill on the mountain bike?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it was, we're looking at it, and this is a warning sign for future expedition races. We always look at the elevation profile when they give it to you before race. You're like, oh man, this race starts at 3,000 meters and it ends at 0 meters. And you're like, that's awesome. That means my net gain for the race is minus 10,000 feet. But it also tends to, it was really great, but it was, it was really steep and really loose. And there's no, in most of these places, there's no curated single track, right? So there might be single track, but it's like an old, jungle trail that can be really nice. And then all of a sudden this volcanic rock that just jagged and you don't know. I mean, there were sections on the last mountain bike that were deep in the forest, these, forest roads that kind of dwindled into nothing, and you're not even sure you're in the right place anymore. And, deep leaf beds covering up, big choke holes, and you're just bombing down these things, and, and crashes were happening all over the place. So
so you went from the trek to the big mountain bike. Did you get back on your feet after that, or did it take you into the first paddle?
No, we did. It was a mountain bike trek.
Okay.
And that was, it was super, that was one of the neat things. I really like it when races have different elements or different, types of disciplines. So the first track was obviously the volcanic mountains. It was all on trail and road. Other than that, the bonus 8 kilometers of riverbed. So it was like on an established trail to the top of the volcano and literally road running on this really rough 4-wheel drive, downhill. And then the second trek was just very, very flat. It was in this like volcanic plateau farmland, with, really kind of just shooting bearings and going long distances and trying to figure out how to cover distance quickly. And so that was really neat. And that had a rope section in it as well, big rappel.
Speaking of shooting bearings, how did you find the navigation overall?
Honestly, it was I guess hit or miss. It wasn't really consistent. A lot of the navigation was pretty easy. Very similar. I've listened to some of the podcasts on Spain, right? Mm-hmm. It was, most of it was a very similar style race of like, not as much pavement, but like we're using trails to cross a big section of this country, right? I think the exception was, which probably proved too much for, some with the wind too, was the kayaking. Like in some sections there, like there's huge distances that you're trying to shoot a bearing across the open ocean, right? At night or to get to a thing. And you're just like, wow, I'm going 40 kilometers, like without any known, exact point.
Yeah. And if you're off by the littlest bit over that distance, a small error, all of a sudden you're miles and miles and miles in the wrong spot.
Yeah, especially with the wind. We were doing 6 and 8 kilometer crossings of these channels with the wind blowing out and trying to aim for a bay that we had by bearing. And it was really, really difficult because you're getting blown so far off course, and you can't really see 8 kilometers nautically. But yeah, actually the last leg, the navigation got more challenging. The last 2 legs had significantly more route choice. And, so the character of the race changed a lot. The last trek and the last mountain bike were what I would say was really world-class, Adventure Race World Series style.
What was interesting there was that you had the way the race moved across the country and it came down the country on the southern side. Yeah. Clearly that huge paddle that was canceled you crossed such a body of water there that you appeared to be in a brand new region of the country. And that's what you're talking about now. It was just everything had sort of changed. You were closer to the water, more coastal, I think is what it would be. It looked more coastal on the maps.
And that last trek was navigationally, it was super easy in the sense that you could literally get on a road and walk that road from the start of that stage to the end of that stage, no checkpoints. And adventure racing is so cool because I think in the States we get used to checkpoints, right? Like in USA, right? Like that thing is like Nationals had 70 something checkpoints. I don't know. It was crazy, right? And then here's this 4-day World Series race that had 17 checkpoints.
Okay.
And 10 of them were on the last bike stage. So there were stages that were like, you start here, you finish there, and go however you want. And so what that does, that opens up not missing a checkpoint and then being unranked. It's just like, how well can you look at this and maybe cross that section of area in 15 hours versus 24 hours.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It looked like that final trekking section appeared to be right along the coastline, and the tides played a role.
Yeah, tides played a role. And, for us, it was a lot of how much we hated the heat. We'll say that is that on the actual coast, like on the beach, you get this sea breeze, which made it, at least a tiny bit bearable. And then there was a road that was just inland by, 100 meters most of the time. It was basically going up, up to the top of the ridge and then down to the next ravine. And so very straightforward, no navigation. You could just sit on that and go as fast as you wanted. But it was so hot. That it became this chance of like, with the tides, can we make it around that headland? Can we run this beach? And so there was a lot of, it was really cool. You come down to a beach and you'd see all these tracks, right? And you'd sometimes see teams ahead or see them behind you. And then it was just a matter of like, who could push the coast longer or who tried it and got stuck and had to come back. And so there was a lot of,
because you had you could possibly be, to use the word cliffed out, you could get cliffed out on the beach. You could go down the beach and run out of sand and have to come back out and go up on the highlands.
and we, like we so badly wanted to be on the beach that, we were there when high tide was going into low. So there was a lot that we couldn't do. And then we just started, about 2 hours after high tide pushing stuff, and we'd get, we were, rock climbing as the waves are crashing on us. Right. Just because we really did not want to, cut our losses and go back. At one point we were on these, craggy things, and we saw this like little tiny hole through the rock. Right. And we couldn't go around the outside because the waves were pummeling it, but we were able to, to climb through, and Chelsea just kept pushing. She kept wanting to go back down to the beach. So we did some pretty harebrained stuff.
That's an interesting dynamic. You climb down into a hole, right? Down on the, you're climbing down, and all of a sudden you can climb into a hole on the beach. A wave could come in, and all of a sudden you're no longer in a hole. You're now in a water-filled tunnel.
Yeah. And I think, she just, for some reason, she got really into it. At one point, like all of us were like, Chelsea, Alex, myself and Alex and Corinne were all like, we got to cut our losses. This is crazy. We're on this scrub slope above the cliffs. Like everything's loose, and we're trying to get down to this beach that we don't even know if we can get off it. It's surrounded as well. And she's just like, no, let me go a little further. And like, she eventually finds the super terrifying way down. And then we're just like, well, now we're committed. And luckily we were able to, get out of there, but it was just going to be a funny thing. And we call the race director. So we're on this tiny hidden, like secluded pirate beach that you didn't even know.
We don't know where we are, but if you can come and get us, that'll be great. It's in the boat. So that went into that. And obviously so it's interesting when you think about it, the amount of distance, the time between the beginning of the race, the fact that the race was halted a couple of times because of the kayaking. And then all of a sudden you had to restart again. Those last two sections felt like a standalone sort of race a little bit, it sounds like.
Yeah, they did. And they did a really good job. I'm always cognizant of the two hats. One is the racer, one is the race director. And I know it can't be easy. Like no race director likes to spend years and years creating their baby race. And like this is going to happen the first time in Panama, and then to have things not turn out the way that they were planned. But it was a really testament to them and their crew and the volunteers and like the logistical nightmare that it must have been of trying to move 100 racers around, the backwoods of Panama at a moment's notice. But
you're spot on. I mean, the race director should get a ton of credit. Right. I mean, this is you've directed races yourself. Darren, you've been in a ton of races that Ben has done. You've raced big races. Anybody who has the guts to put on a race of this breadth and this length and this size, short of them making decisions in which racer safety was truly in doubt, which was never the case in this race, they deserve all the credit in the world for what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think that's always going to be, an issue. There are definitely people that are going to look back at this and say, man, those paddle legs, you should have seen it coming. There's no way you're, going to do that. And some of the best memories I have are the paddle legs that didn't get canceled in the Patagonia expedition race. Like only 30% of them ever went off. But every year we got to go, like, maybe this is the year we're going to get to do a paddle. And when it finally happens, so I think that it's certainly it's not good. Like I am also, as a race director, I'm always trying to build what we call storm-proof races, right? So no matter what the weather is, no matter whether it's raining, like dark night, like it's going to happen, right? And I'm lucky to live in a place where that is usually very, very possible. But let's face it, putting somebody in a 50-kilometer open ocean crossing, right, is just not, in a race setting where things can go wrong. Like you're going to get wind, you're going to get storms, you're going to get that stuff.
There's so many factors that are aligned against that type of stage for it to actually, it has to thread the needle for a lot of different things, the tides, the weather, the wind, everything has to go in the right direction.
The use of sit on top kayaks, anyway, well, but they did, it felt like it was still a race when all this was happening because, we didn't really have all the information we wanted as racers because it was also the language barrier, but it also wasn't slow. Like you'd finish the transition and they'd, when we got stopped halfway through that first kayak, we'd made it to this portage point. Nobody was there. We just, came around this thing and huge winds and it was getting dark. And we're like, well, we got to at least make it here because we can shelter because we're screwed if we don't. And we make it there and nobody really knows what's going on, but they're like, you need to stay here, right? We put a call in, and within an hour and a half, they've got us. We get in a truck, they drive us an hour, and they're like, this is your new TA, you're leaving in 45 minutes to start a staggered everything, and so you're like, wow, yeah, I got a couple hours of rest, but I needed that anyway. And, and so it was like that. Like when they canceled the second one, it was like, here's the plan. You guys are going, you have this much time, right? And everything's staggered. Here's your time credit. And so it wasn't like we'll figure it out at the end. It was like everybody's still racing. So that was, it was a huge testament that all these people came. And, it was the first year in AR Panama, and they definitely have some things to figure out, but they put on a really solid, they just got to turn the freaking temperature down.
It's warm, right? Warm. How hot was it? How hot did it, how it feels and how it really is? What was the number on the thermometer?
Well, I didn't do the conversion. It was up to 30 C, I think. So I think that's close to 90. I'm not sure.
Yeah. And especially coming out of the Pacific Northwest. You had said that the other day, Darren, in our other podcast, that for teams coming out of Bend and coming out of Canada, it just feels so much warmer because we're not used to it yet.
Yeah, it was oppressively hot. Even I was just standing in the sun feeling sick.
Gotcha.
Not having done anything at all.
Yeah, it was either the first day when we were in the mountains up at the volcano, and they told us in the race briefing, like, make sure you take all your mandatory gear. Cause yeah, we know it sounds crazy to bring a mid layer up to Panama, but it gets really cold in the volcano. Right. And we're running up this volcano thinking, it's deathly hot, and knowing that, all right, we're at the highest point of the course and everything's just going to get hotter. And the humidity too. I think in the middle of the night, I usually look forward to trying to get a little bit of sleep somewhere in the like 3 to 5 a.m. range. But oh my God, as soon as that sun went down, we're just like, we get 12 hours to race as hard as we can, because we were just dripping. Like it's midnight and you're hiking, trekking, mountain biking, whatever it is, and sweat. Like you can just feel it coming out of your pores. I don't know.
Everything is wet. You're wet. Your pack's wet, and you're doing the math in your head of how much you're drinking versus how much you're sweating, and
And in the daytime, like you have to wear clothing because you will also just like burn to death. I mean, that's like the sunburn. And so you just can't, as a racer expedition, like taking care of yourself is really hard because you can't adequately put on sunscreen like while you're racing through the jungle. And so basically you just have to wear clothes to cover everything.
How'd your stomach hold up during the race?
My stomach was great. Alex took the brunt of it. And we were talking about it afterwards. I think at this level of racing and this kind of race, like your team, like somebody on your team is going to get, we don't know what that is,
It's fireworks. They've been going off every once in a while.
Maybe another team is coming in.
But they're celebrating right now as we speak. As we're recording this live, there's fireworks going on outside.
Yeah, somebody survived.
It was supposed to be a festival this week, I think, and it got canceled because of COVID. So I think
it's Ash Wednesday next week, so it's Carnival.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, it was the amount that we had to, stay on top of that so that we didn't fry and stay covered. And it was pretty remarkable. Like I think all of us were aware that somebody on the team was going to go down.
Right.
And not just us, like all the teams are out there, and there were definitely teams that's just like when you do a high altitude race, if you live in Ecuador, you're doing pretty good. The Brazilian teams and the Panamanian teams and the Ecuadorian teams, like they were better suited and they kind of knew what to expect. Mm-hmm. A lot of us joke like, oh yeah, I spent some time training in the sauna. It's like,
there's no way to replace it. Yeah. It's like, I live at sea level and I went and I raced in Ecuador. Like there was no preparation for that. Like you just get down and hold on as long as you can.
Yeah.
I know that you've had a lot of success with 4-hour fuel with what you've been working on for yourself. How did that work out for you down there?
It was awesome. I used it for probably, 70-75% of my calories. A big piece of that was going to be the paddle. The entire first paddle while we were paddling for us, that was like 8 hours. That's all I had. And then it was just like a plan. And then on the mountain bikes, like the mountain bikes was, I have a cool setup on the mountain bike. So I just have 2 water bottles like right behind the stem, like to kind of hang those, and then 2 on the frame. So I just have, what was that, 80 ounces of fuel there, and 3 of those are filled with whatever, my new favorite is cherry, which this was the first time using that. And it was funny in the heat. Normally I really like some of the staples, like the banana and the mango, but somehow like the lemon and the cherry, I could just imagine they were limeade, and somehow they drank a little cooler.
Right, they tasted colder.
In my mind, I was like, I can have the banana that when it gets warm, it's like, I don't know, it's like, whatever. Like you just have this thing in your head, and then I can have a cherry limeade. And yeah, so it's been working well. And I know Chelsea, primarily sourced off of that. It's I've talked about it a little bit in some of my discourses. As I do more and more racing, I need less and less choices. Right. I like when I'm out there in an expedition race, especially, choices can be debilitating. Like when you get into your TA box and you're like, everything looks good, nothing looks good. And you're just like, what do we want? And for me, fueling lets me, be at my best as an athlete. So a lot of it is just kind of taking and knowing that like those 3 bottles on my bike, that's 12 hours of food.
Gotcha.
And we'll see, we've got like, that's, I know we've been having some athletes, we're going to have some more athletes help us test it and really refine the packaging, because they keep exploding. So that's no good. So just some of the first prototypes like went out, and, I don't know what the postal service is playing football with them or whatever, but you don't need 800, calories worth of powder exploded when you open your mail. So
that's a tough conversation on the old customer service phone line.
Yeah. But it's been really fun. I really appreciated Chelsea and Darren and kind of our team really all doing the heavy lifting on trying that stuff and dialing it in and really using it.
And good on you for sort of digging into that, the using your race experience and then designing a product around it that's going to work out well for you, and then testing it on yourself. It's going to work out great, right? You're going to get it dialed in eventually, and the packages will no longer explode. And next thing you know, people are using it all the time.
Yeah, it was really fun to use this time in kind of the deepest level we have.
Right.
And like our food weight was really tiny. Like, you come into TA and I grab my little thing, and normally you have something that weighs, 3 or 4 or 5 pounds and has all these choices. And I grab this bag and I'm like, is this really all I'm going to need for the next 12 hours?
There's all your calories.
Yeah. So,
so knowing that you're just 7 hours post race, and I know that with all the restarts and the staggered start and the staggered stops and all that, do you know where you finished up overall in terms of the race, or are they still figuring that out?
Yeah, no, I think it's all preliminary, but I think we finished in 4th.
Congratulations.
Which, yeah, thank you. And we had definitely some goals, and we've been doing a lot of, especially Chelsea and I, a lot of really kind of pointed training as I get older, to kind of see where I can get in the sport in the next 5 years. Chelsea is not even really understood where her ceiling is yet, because she's just become more and more phenomenal as an athlete. This race in particular, like, she was just carrying 2 packs basically the entire race. And you kind of can tell the measure of a mountain biker too, or endurance mountain biker on day 3 or 4 of an expedition race, because it's like how you just get these super steep, crazy, loose hills. And it's like, 1 or 2 athletes in the field will make it to the top of that. Most of them will get off at the bottom. And then it kind of, becomes like, oh, can I make it to this point, to this point, to this point? And Chelsea over and over and over again, just like climbed every single.
Yeah. I don't have the calculator handy, but I like to do her weight to strength ratio.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She's part fairy or something.
Yeah, it's the best in the team. Other teams are starting to comment to me about how strong she is.
Yeah. And there's a number. There was a woman on the Brow team, Christina, who we rode with some. They also like just this phenomenal, like, small female human that just like get to these hills, and we're just like, it was cool as a racer because I got inspired. Like, realistically, it's not, you're on a team and it's not that much faster to like push your bike up that damn steep hill or ride it. And It's debatable which is worth the energy or whatever. But sometimes you got to do things just because you can. And like, it was really cool. So there was a whole time when, everybody was getting like, and climbing these huge hills. And it was pretty fun.
That's great stuff.
But Yeah. So, so I think we got fourth. And again, this, as much as we, race to try to win and stuff like that, this race definitely, will in the athlete's mind have a bit of an asterisk by it. In the sense that races are won and lost by the elite teams by pacing, by, critical sleep decisions, by all those things. And that was the kind of unfortunate part of this race is all of that got taken away. Right? Like sleep strategy wasn't a thing because you didn't have any option. Your sleep was, you're going to sit here on this bus for 6 hours, after you finish 3 stages of the race. So of course you're going to sleep. Like there's nothing to do. Right. And then you're not going to sleep later because you just, sat on the bus for 6 hours and now you got to go crush the jungle leg or whatever, and so everybody had the same sleep strategy. It was like sleep when the race tells you to stop and then go as hard as you can.
Really good point. That factor, which is huge in so many races, like who sleeps when and they bank sleep, they don't bank sleep. That just got taken off the table by virtue of all the restarts.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And you didn't even have the choice of like, we're going to sleep here. So we hit this difficult navigation stage during daylight or night. It was like, when they told you to go, you went.
Right.
And so it became, I think it was very challenging in a different way is because, what I find is there's a lot of teams out there that are really good on the first 24 to 36 hours. If we're talking expedition race, like you just see it every time you see a world championships, you're like, I've never heard of these teams, but man, they're mixing it up in the top 10 for the first 24 hours. And then they kind of all fall apart. But this had it was basically like 3 36-hour races, right? With 6 miserable hours in between each one, where you can't really get enough rest to do any good. And, on some level that 6 hours of sleep puts your body in a worse place to start. Like you've done some expedition racing and, like waking up from a 20-minute nap, like it is magic, right? Yeah. The second you finish that race and lay down for your first like 3 or 4 hours sleep, you wake up, you feel absolutely horrible. Yeah. And the idea of like being able to do anything is like impossible. Right. But the race, you just get just enough sleep during an expedition race that you wake up and you kind of like forget that you ever got sleep and your body's willing to move or to run or to bike. Right. But this race was different because like they stop us and we don't know if there's going to be a restart. We have very little information. So you kind of like let your guard down. Right. And then the guy with the truck shows up and says, we're taking you an hour and a half away and then you're going to start immediately. We're like, what?
At any point during those restarts and those stoppages, did you think that the race was over?
I mean, I thought it was going to be interesting, how it was still going to be a race and they found a way to make it meaningful and to allow the people to compete. And for that, I'm really thankful because let's face it, this is a dumb and damaging sport. If you just look at the bare bones of it, like if you take away the inspiration and the overcoming, like the quest aspect of it, like it's just dumb. Right. But like, and so they were able to, even in the midst of these changes, like keep that aspect of competitiveness of questing, for something greater, for your team, for the experience, for the competition, so that when you did get back out there and every single thing hurt and you're like, I don't know if I could spend another day, in this heat climbing up mountains, you figure out a way. And that to me is super valuable because when you cross the finish line and that has been the backdrop, then it does all mean something. And it means something that's pretty tremendous. As opposed to without it.
And credit to you and to Darren and for the team for this is the first time that Panama has put a race of this length and breadth on and taking the risk of upending your life, getting on a plane, bringing all your gear and doing the race. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for extending the sport out even further. ARWS, they love their races and they love their newer racers. And it's a great thing that Panama now has established itself, and it's one tremendous learning curve for everybody. Right. It's a learning curve for the race director and for the infrastructure. So good on you for doing that. Darren, if I can pivot to you for a second, because I'm assuming you have a bit more. By the way, Jason, you're doing a great job with your wits. You're hanging in there. Proud of you. I know you're tired. Darren, you might have a little bit more of your wits about you because your sleep was not as disjointed. A little bit. Yeah. What is your overall take on, as someone who saw the race from a different perspective, what was your overall take on the experience? And did any teams other than Bend jump out at you as really just impressing you on the race? Like, did you come across somebody like, wow, they're killing it? Maybe a newer team that was getting into it. Was it an experienced team that was really showing it up? Or were you kind of Ben centered and you didn't see a whole lot of the race?
I didn't see a whole lot. It was mostly Ben centered, and then the top 8 teams, and it kind of like whittled down to the top 6. And, it was Estonia, Viderade, the Brazilian team, France, and Bones and Bend. Those are the main teams I was around. And they all just impressed me with how fast they kept going and how they overcame the heat. Like I said, I was feeling sick just standing in it, so I can't even imagine racing in it.
Yeah, it's something else, right? And I guess the point there is when you have no choice but to race in it, you're racing it.
Yeah, if someone said you have to make it to the next spot, then I would go. But I would not be excited about it.
Wow, excellent. Jason, any closing thoughts before we say goodbye?
I'm just like to echo how thankful I am for that Darren was out here, and I know that it is one of those things, like traveling with people that also race. It's been really cool because Darren says he couldn't imagine racing, and yet he was doing world championships.
Yeah,
also.
you and I both know what's called time ahead. We both know that if someone got sick on the way to the airport, Darren would have gotten his bike, he would have been racing alongside you the entire time.
Yeah, and Chelsea would have been doing her thing, and I forget, because putting on races is really challenging in different ways, but it's so much fun because you get to imagine the suffering in the best positive light, as if you really want to do that. And then, I saw Darren at the first TA. I think we'd run up and over the mountain, and we didn't get I have two artificial hips. One of them is literally a year old, and the 17th of February was the day that my doctor said, "Oh, it's okay for you to start running a mile once a week to retrain." That was the year anniversary. And I'm like, yeah, I've already been doing a little of that. And then, they make you start with the worst possible thing, which is this loose boulder proprioceptive run, which I'm not supposed to do for years. Right. And, I come into that first TA just so close to heat stroke, just brutalized. And I was like, if this was a relay sport, I would have been like, Darren, you're up.
You're up. Go get him. Here's my jersey.
I'll take some photos.
They'll never notice. Take my race jersey. Get going.
But it was really just neat to be here, and I love seeing the sport grow, and I love what Pablo and his team. I love how excited they were to explore Panama. I don't think that they know how hot it is. I literally think all the locals here, that the course designers, they were excited by the nice weather, right? Which is cool. It's holy cow. We saw these people out in the middle of nowhere on this mountain bike ride, working fully clothed, we're just dripping. And they're in jeans and a button up, some wool thing, carrying huge, heavy loads, just trudging along. We're like, how is this possible? I would have a heart attack and die.
I assume for the most part that if they came up to Bend, they'd be like, it's raining so much. And you'd be like, what are you talking about? This is nothing. This is a light storm.
Anyway, so it was really cool to see the culture. Everybody was friendly, and to have these, countries, because essentially I think, I don't know the details, but I think this is something that Panama was proud of. It's not a race director saying, hey, I want to go put a race on. It's a country saying, wow, we saw this, whether it was the Eco Challenge or whatever, and this is awesome. And our country can supply this experience to people. And that's always hard as a race director to come into somebody else's backyard and build something. But they did a really, a great first race. And, I really think that I'm really excited that we now get to spend 3 days, at the tiny village of Padasi on the beach, and wherever it is in Panama. I don't, my race maps, everything disappears from the world map. But
you're just there now. Yeah, now it's just where you live.
Cool. You get to have ceviche and laying hammocks and have a Panamanian vacation. And we've already done all the hard stuff of running up a volcano and mountain biking through the jungle and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Great. Well, guys, thanks for joining the Dark Zone on this Flash podcast. We'll get this up as soon as possible. Best of luck getting home. Darren, thanks for coming on twice. Jason, great race. Thank everybody for us. Be safe down there. We'll see you when you get home.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Darren and Jason, for your time. Be sure to follow Darren on Instagram at Traveling Darren. If you have enjoyed this episode, please pay a visit to your podcast streaming platform of choice and leave us a review. That is the best way to spread the word. And always feel free to reach out to me, Brian, at ardarkzone.com. Your feedback and guest suggestions are always welcome. Thank you, listeners, for joining us in the Dark Zone, and have fun out there.